So you're probably using the Next.js server actions wrong, and that's because if you're reading their docs, they're going to lead you down the wrong path in my opinion. So I'm going to show you how they want you to do it and how I think you should do it instead. Alright, so check out this very basic to-do application. So I just get to-do from a server component, and then we map those to-dos, and here we have a add to-do form, and this add to-do form obviously has to use the use client directive. We use form state so that we can get the current form status, like if there's an error or whatever message we return from the server. We also need to have use form status so that we can have a loading state. Here we just, if it's pending, then we disable the button. Now let's take a look at the server action. Here I have a create to do server action. It takes in a previous state and a form data parameter, but I actually don't know why we need the previous state. It's in the doc, so I'm just going to leave it there, but we probably don't need it. Here we have to extract the form inputs from the form data object. If you look back at the add form, here we actually have an input and the name is to do. So that's the name we have to put here. And the thing about this is there is no autocomplete, there's no end-to-end type safety. So you would just have to go back and forth to look at it. So if you have multiple inputs, you have to go back and forth, look at it, and then go back here and type in. And if you type it in wrong, which you will probably, you're going to get an error or something like that. After you extract that, you have to parse it with Zod. Zod is a validation library, which is what Next.js docs recommends. You parse it. If it's not valid, you return the errors, obviously. And it is valid, you go on to add it to your database. Here I insert it into my database, and this line above here is just to wait 2 seconds so you can actually see the loading state. We validate path, so the to-dos will show up, and we return a message with the to-do information. Otherwise, return the errors. Alright, now let's talk about the optimal way to use server actions in Next.js, and that's with the Next Safe Actions library. This library is amazing. It makes server actions so much more enjoyable to use and greatly reduce the amount of boilerplate that you have to write. So to use the Next Safe Action library is very easy. You get a use action hook, and all you have to do is pass in a server action. Now this is a unique server action that you create through the Next Safe Action library, and I'll show you the implementation later, but it's different from a normal server action. So you pass in this unique server action and you get back an execute function, a reset, a result, and a status object that you can use in your code. And as you can see here, I have a button that when clicked will trigger the execute function. And basically when you trigger this execute function, it runs the create to do safe action server action. So when you do that, all this does is add a to do to my database. And as you can see here, I'm also using the status object that you get back from the use action to determine the loading state of my buttons. So when status is equal to executing, I disable the button. I'm also using the result object I get back from the use action. The result object is what you get after you're done running the server action. So after it's done, you get back the result. And by the way, you don't actually have to use the use action hook. You can just run the server action directly, which is really nice. So I'll show you that right now. So as you can see here, I'm actually calling the create to do safe action directly. I'm not using it with the use action hook. It's not actually needed. And when you do that, you get back a very unique object. I'll show you this. So when you do that, you get back an object with the data or the server error or the validation error. This is very nice. This is different from the normal server action. So if you were to do this with a normal server action, you would get back something different. I'll show you that. So just notice that this is a create to do safe action and this is a create to do action. So this is, the top one is from the Next Safe Actions library, and this is just the default server action. Okay, so when you do the normal server action, what you get back is not that unique object. This is just a normal object that is a string or errors. Basically, it doesn't do all the error handling for you. Now this makes it really easy to implement a toast feature because all you have to do is await the server action, and then when you get back a response, you get the data object, and that data object will contain whatever you return from the server, or it contain the errors, and you could toast that message directly. If you were using the normal server actions to implement a toast feature, you would have to use effect to watch this state object right here, and whenever it changes, you can throw the toast message. And as you can see, when you compare these two way of doing things, this is the normal way and this is the optimal way of doing things, you can see there are some benefits already. So up here we actually have to create a separate submit button. You need to do that or else it wouldn't work, because you need to use the form status hook inside this button, and here we actually don't need to do that. We just use the status object that we get back from the use action hook. So this is one of the niceties of using this library. It just makes it a little bit more convenient, because I don't think this is very convenient. When you have to, just for a little button, you have to use separate that into its own component and then use status hook inside of it. That's not a great experience in my opinion. Additionally, you get end-to-end type safety, which makes it impossible for you to pass in the wrong information. So right here, if I try to pass in a number, I would have a TypeScript error. I can only pass in a string, which keeps stupid mistakes from happening. It happens all the time. So in my opinion, end-to-end type safety is the most powerful feature, and I would not trade that for progressive enhancement. Okay, now let's look at how to implement create to do safe action. To create a safe action is very easy. All you have to do is pass in a Zod schema. Here I define it up here. All we're checking if it's a string with main length of 2. And when you pass in a schema, it will automatically parse the inputs for you. So you can look up here, this is the normal way, and you have to manually parse the inputs. And down here, when you pass in the schema, it will automatically parse the inputs. So if you look here, the inputs is a to-do object that is a string. And it will handle all the error handling for you as well. So you don't have to do this, you don't have to check if it's success and return the error, you don't have to wrap it in a try-catch. As you can see, it's much shorter, it's about 1/3 of the length, and all of the error handling is done for you, which is super nice. And by the way, if you're using Drizzle, you can just infer the create to do schema from the model itself. So let's check that out. So here we use create select schema, which is from Drizzle. We put in the to do model, we omit ID, and that's going to give you the insert to do parameters that you can use for your schema. So here, instead of manually writing out the schema with this a to do, you can just use the inferred model instead. And on top of that, you can also use middlewares with Next safe action library. Here I have a auth action that you can only do when the user is authenticated. Let's look at how we implemented that. Here I'm just mocking it, but basically you check if the user is logged in, return the ID, and if it's not, it will throw an error. And when you do that, you will actually get back the user ID as the second parameter to use. So this user ID is guaranteed to exist, and you cannot call this action unless the user is logged in.